Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a meeting of the Zoning Subcommittee. Councilor Kennedy just did call, and he's about 4 or 5 minutes out. So I would like to start, in deference to those of you who are here on time, I'd like to get started with the Zoning Subcommittee. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilor Milanazo.
Here.
Councilor Kennedy. Councilor Noon.
Here.
2 present.
Thank you. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss developing an ordinance regulating student housing. We're joined this evening by Councilor John Leahy, as well as Councilor Dave Conway, and the administration is represented by Eric Slagle, our Director of Development Services, and Gary Gordon, our Assistant City Solicitor from the Law Department. We do have a proposed, actually plural, amendments to the rental property ordinance. So if it's okay with the people here assembled, we should probably have a presentation by the administration, and we'll certainly open it up to the public for comments and questions. And I believe there's a sign-up sheet at the microphone too, so if you do come before the subcommittee, please sign your name and address, please. So if it's okay with my colleague, I'll recognize Mr. Slagle. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. As requested by the City Council, I believe it was probably 6 or 8 weeks ago, the last zoning subcommittee, Development Services worked with the Law Department to come up with a draft ordinance that would attempt to begin to address some of the problems that I think the neighborhood groups identified in the last meeting, which I think seemed to be stemmed from an increase in student housing in areas both near the university but expanding out from the traditional university neighborhoods. After a lot of deliberation, staff, along with, again, Assistant Solicitor Gary Gordon, who was very instrumental in the drafting of this ordinance, made the determination that rather than address this through zoning, it made sense to address it through amendments to the rental property ordinance that the council adopted back in, I think, 2012. I do want to very briefly touch on the reasons for that, because I know that this is the zoning subcommittee. This event originally was contemplated as a zoning problem. One of the issues that we were trying to address was, as the council is aware, anything that's done in zoning creates grandfathered rights, and in an effort to try and be able to deal with the problems, including problems that already exist, we made the determination that amending the rental property ordinance, which is a general ordinance and not a zoning ordinance, would avoid the problem with changing something in zoning that would grandfather in everything that's pre-existed that date. So I'm going to very kind of briefly discuss the proposed changes. I do want to say that the gist of the changes that were made was an effort to put the onus on the landlords to verify that they aren't violating the requirement that already exists in both zoning and will now exist in the rental property ordinance of not having more than 3 unrelated people living in a property, in a unit. So that is a pre-existing definition, has existed in zoning for as long as I've lived, as long as I've worked for the city. I didn't go back to find out how long it's been there, but it's been in our zoning ordinance for a long time. This codifies a section into the rental property ordinance that defines a housekeeping unit that is consistent with that zoning definition of not more than 3 unrelated people. And it requires the landlords to affirm, under the pains and penalties of perjury, with an affidavit that they file with their rental unit application, that they are not renting to more than 3 unrelated people. And if they have a property that is larger than 3 bedrooms, they're going to have to provide documentation from the tenants that they are related if there's more than 3 persons living in a unit. So the idea would be the onus would be on the landlords to sign these affidavits. The affidavits would be on file, and if we got a report or complaint and had reason to believe through an investigation that a property was in fact violating the ordinance, we would have a zero tolerance policy and immediately start finding the landlord and removing the occupancy of that unit until it was brought into compliance. And obviously, the landlord would be at risk of perjury for having signed an affidavit that indicated something that that we did not believe was the case. It requires new information that we haven't collected in the past, which is the number and size of the rental unit on the property. In the past, our rental unit permits merely talk about the number of units, and each unit we didn't get any further information on a unit. In this case, this requires a landlord to describe the size, the number of bedrooms in a unit. They're required to provide the number of legal occupants to the unit, which is not something that the city has collected in the past. Again, as I mentioned before, the owner has to provide an affidavit if there's more than 3 individuals living in a unit that they are in fact related. Additional provisions that have been added to the ordinance would be a new registration within 30 days of a transfer of ownership of the property. So if the property is sold, we require that new owner to come in and sign an affidavit saying that, affirming to the same set of information that the prior owner had affirmed. And if there's going to be specific penalty clauses added in there that if the owner doesn't do this, then we can revoke their rental permit. They're not permitted to rent the units, and we can condemn the units for failure to provide that information. All occupants of a rental unit have to sign the lease agreement, where each occupant is jointly and severally responsible for leasing the entire rental unit. This is an effort to kind of preclude the rooming house problem where somebody's renting out an individual room. So all the leases are required to conform to this, unless you are a legal rooming house with a license to be a rooming house, you have to have leases that are leased for the entire unit. You're not allowed to lease specific rooms. The inspections that are allowed under this section, part of the inspections, the inspectors will be able to inspect the unit, as well as all documentation that the owner is required to provide, which is the ownership information, the size and occupancy of the rental units, the lease agreements, and the documentation as to the kindred relationship of the occupants. In other words, the landlord has the affirmative duty, if they're renting to more than 3 people, to obtain documentation that they're related. And we are entitled to have that if there's a complaint that comes in that says they're not. There was a determination made very early in the process. We were not going to specifically have language about students. This is going to apply to every rental unit across the city, regardless of which location it is in, regardless of whether or not the students are living there or not. It's an ordinance of blanket application. So we're not intending to target students at all. This is going to be we will do inspections upon complaints in an attempt to make determinations. And again, when we have those complaints, we will be requiring the landlords to provide this information. Failure to provide the information documenting the kindred of the individuals that live there means they're in violation of the ordinance, and therefore we can shut down the property. So the idea would be to make it easier on the inspectors to enforce the ordinances that are already on the books, and I think that's kind of the crux of the issue that we've had in the past. And again, all this information is required to be provided with us within 30 days of either a change of ownership or a change of occupancy. So the minute they rent out to tenants, the landlords are required to come in and sign another affidavit saying that the people there are not related, and they're required to obtain documentation if there's more than 3 of them that they are related.
Thank you, Mr. Slagle. Do my colleagues have any comments or questions at this point? Councilor Kennedy? No? Okay.
No, I'll reserve it.
Okay, a question that I would have, does the rental ordinance get noted within the zoning code, or is it a standalone document? Is there a cross-reference between any parts of the zoning code and the rental ordinance, especially as the rental ordinance now as amended or being proposed to be amended?
It's not. The rental ordinance is a standalone document. The idea would be, again, that this is a general ordinance that doesn't provide any grandfathering rights. It's already on the books. The council passed it many years ago. And all we're doing is amending kind of the documentation requirements of that ordinance to provide us a greater level of enforcement. We will be enforcing what's on here as a housekeeping unit, but we will make sure that the language of housekeeping unit, it mirrors the language of in the zoning ordinance about a family, so that those two, us enforcing the housekeeping unit gives us the same result as enforcing the definition of family under the zoning ordinance.
I know at one meeting, Councilor Kennedy had brought up how often we actually go out and inspect multifamily properties. I think we do it on a 3-year rotation. Is that something that would be more aggressive under this amendment, or is that something that would, again, stay?
That was something that Councilor Kennedy brought up. We were in the process of drafting this ordinance. We did not put in the change that Councilor Kennedy had suggested to change it to 5. In part because I wanted to try to focus our conversations during this discussion on what I think was the concerns of the neighborhood. But I would absolutely, I mean, if that's something that makes sense to the council to take up as kind of, while we're tweaking the ordinance to take up that as well, I think it makes sense. That's not in the draft we provided because it kind of wasn't on the table when we started this drafting process.
Thank you. Councilor Noon and Councilor Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you stated that you don't know when was the zoning ordinance passed with regard to the no more than 3 unrelated reside in one unit.
Yeah, I know that it's been enforced since at least the 90s, but I don't know how far back that no more than 3 unrelated.
When you feel time change, so should the zoning ordinance?
Well, as part of this process, Development Services staff did look at other municipalities to see what the trend is across the Commonwealth. The trend is actually to increase that. So Amherst, for instance, has recently increased to no more than 5 unrelated people. I think no more than 3 unrelated people is the most restrictive in the Commonwealth right now. I haven't found any that was more restrictive currently. As to whether or not there's a time for a change, I think that's an excellent conversation that I think is appropriate to have.
Does that conflicted with the health code of Massachusetts in terms of dwelling occupancy? Let's say, for example, if you have more than 120 square feet, you can have 2 beds in there. Is that correct?
Right. So. And as part of a separate issue, the council was provided with the measurements for the sanitary code. I do not think that they conflict. They're 2 totally separate. They regulate 2 totally separate issues. I would defer to Assistant City Solicitor Gordon on this issue, but I'm pretty sure that the SJC has ruled relatively convincingly that municipalities have the right to regulate the number of unrelated persons in a dwelling unit. I think that's correct.
Well, certainly the U.S. Supreme Court has done that. They said that a municipality can certainly do it based upon different factors that are essential within the community in order to regulate the number of people who constitute a family unit within a municipality. The appellate courts in Massachusetts are kind of split in different ways depending on whether you're looking at a municipal ordinance in some situations versus a statute like the lodging statute. So there have been different determinations in terms of that. But the issue of the number of people in terms of occupancy limits is different than what was being addressed in this ordinance. I'm not familiar with the state standard. I know the federal standard is 150 square feet for one person, another 100 for, and then it also puts in limitations in terms of sleeping areas and the size of sleeping areas. But that's not related to a family unit or a housekeeping unit. That's just related to the issue of overcrowding and whether you're compelling more services to be provided by having more people within the occupancy of the unit. That's a separate issue that really wasn't addressed within this ordinance.
The chairman asked a question pertaining to how aggressive would this inspection be? Would this inspection be? It sounds like, according to the amendment, it should be passed, that every change in occupancy of rental unit, that the owner will have to report that and maybe inspect it. So therefore, the inspection could happen maybe twice a year, maybe more?
Right, so there's a difference, in the contemplation of this ordinance, there's a difference between applying for your rental unit permit and updating the information that the city has on file. As I mentioned about Councilor Kennedy's suggestion to move it from 3 to 5, we didn't change that in this draft, so the inspection would still only happen once every 3 years. Yeah. There would still be an affirmative requirement on the landlord to update the information that's required under the ordinance whenever the occupancy was changed or whenever the ownership was changed. Those would not trigger new inspections. What would trigger an inspection of the unit was if we got a complaint that somebody believed that there was a violation of the ordinance, i.e. more than 3 unrelated people living at the property.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. The chair would like to recognize Councilor Rita Mercia who joined us. Thank you. Councilor Conway?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick questions here for Mr. Slagle. As far as the violation of these ordinance, what is the penalty for a violation?
So the penalty clause that was put in here, so first of all general ordinances in Lowell allow up to $300 per day for a violation, each day being a separate violation. That is a general, but that's in the code of City of Lowell's Code of Ordinances as a general ordinance. In addition, this allows us to revoke the rental permit and to preclude the owner from from renting units or receiving compensation for the occupants in those units. So those are additional penalties that could be exercised under this ordinance.
How often have we collected $300 for someone that's violated the ordinance?
So the violation of the original, so this is a draft ordinance, so obviously there hasn't been any violations of here. We have fined people for $300.
Have we? So in other words, there's been a lot, the point I'm trying to make here very quickly is that I'm sure there's been a lot of violations over the years. And I'm just wondering what percentage of these violators are actually penalized and what percentage do we actually collect? The reason why I'm asking that is if I violate something and I know that there's not going to be a collection of that, why would I care? I would continue with the violation.
Right. So it's kind of tangential, but I think it's useful to mention. Over the last few years, we have, in an effort to combat, I think, the problem that you're pointing out, we are moving our violations into our general billing module in Munis, so they show up on the tax bill. We have the ability to roll those violations, if you don't pay them, onto the next year's tax bill of a property, and then they are collected as any other violation on the taxes.
I think that going forward, we need some teeth in this, because if I know I'm not going to get, I'm going to get fined, but I'm not going to really have to pay it, well, then why would I follow the rules and the regulations? And also, you mentioned just quickly that potentially you could shut down a property. In the past, have we shut down properties before?
Absolutely. I hate to say it, but we are forced to shut down properties on a regular basis for various code violations, be they sanitary code or building code violations, occasionally for zoning code violations. So we do shut down properties semi-regularly, more often than I'd like, but we do it.
Yeah, I don't want to take any more time up, but I want to make sure that we do have the administration have the teeth in there to collect these fines. And I think if we show the public that if they're going to violate these regulations, they're going to have to pay. And I think by doing that, that's going to cut down many of the problems, not all of them, but many of them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. The chair would like to recognize Mayor Samaras has joined us, as well as Councilor Elliott. Thank you. Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eric, when we passed the ordinance that was for every 3 years, several years ago, I think everybody was really happy with that. The problem and the reason that I was suggesting that we make it 5 years instead of 3 years is because the city was not complying with the ordinance. In other words, we weren't inspecting every rental unit every 3 years within a 3-year cycle, were we? And so the idea of making it to 5 would just be that there would be 2 more years, and that with a 5-year cycle rather than a 3-year cycle, maybe it would be more realistic for us to do every single unit over that time. So why wouldn't you change that then?
Again, I think that's a perfectly appropriate thing, and it wasn't put in this draft because this draft was put together and was going up for discussion in the law department and with staff before you had brought up that issue. So we just didn't make that change. If that's something that is the wish of the subcommittee, we can absolutely put it in here to put that into the ordinance as well.
Well,
I think it would be appropriate, but
Let me ask you this. Would it be better to do, could we do 4 years? Is that realistic, or is 5 a better idea? I mean, changing it to 5 if we can do every unit is fine, but you don't want to be 5 years down the road and find out that we couldn't do it in 5 either,
right.
right?
The one thing I would say about 5 years would be that would make it consistent with the requirement under the building code that there be certificates of inspection issued for multifamily units every 5 years as well. So it would kind of put those two inspections on a mirror track. I think that would probably make it easier to make sure that they could get done. So I think it's probably a logical, if we're going to change it from 3,
Yeah.
the logical thing to do would be to change it to 5, only because we already have a multifamily inspection under the building code that's on that time statutorily under the state building code, so we can't change that.
Okay. Could you talk a little bit about in-law apartments, specifically single-family homes that have an in-law apartment either in the basement or maybe attached? I would say that in some instances, I'm in favor of in-law apartments. I think that some families have circumstances that make that be the only thing that would work for the extended family. But what often happens is people have an in-law apartment and it stays that way, and then all of a sudden the circumstances change, and then they continue to rent it out, not to a family member, but to somebody else. What are we doing about that?
Right, so right now, in-law apartments are not legal in the city of Lowell. During the last large collection of zoning changes that we made, we had, at the request of the city council, drafted an ordinance to allow accessory dwelling units, which would be in effect in-law apartments, with some protections that we tried to build in to make sure that the exact situation that you're talking about would at least be less likely to happen. They were required to put in a bond to have it undone. They were required to get inspections. I think at that time, Councilor Belanger had requested that we have annual inspections to make sure that that it was still being used as an in-law apartment. The council made the determination after hearing from the neighborhood to not act on that, so that kind of was tabled and hasn't been brought back up by the subcommittee. What does often happen is individuals will put separate facilities in their single-family home that aren't separated by locked exterior doors, don't have 2 means of egress. They operate as an in-law apartment, but legally they're not a separate unit because they don't have locked doors in between one facility and the other, and that they can do as a matter of right as long as they pull the appropriate building permits. So those, we're not allowed to. There was an Ernie Bach filed a case, and he got sued by the municipality he lived in because he had 6 kitchens in his house, and the building inspector tried to say, well, that's 6 separate units, and the court said, no, it's not. He can have as many kitchens as he wants. So you can put another kitchen and a bathroom and a bedroom and a living area off of your you're a single family, as long as you don't have it as a separate unit, which means separate locked means of egress. And so that happens a lot, and that's something that we struggle with trying to police, because some people, as you mentioned, try to push the envelope and then turn those into separate units, and if we find them, we go back and make them pull the permits to turn it back into one contiguous space.
I think Ernie Block also had a zoo in his yard. I'm not sure everybody could do that
Yeah,
either.
well, I
think it
don't,
was,
not in Lowell, we can't do that in Lowell, no chickens or.
Okay, so I guess what I would like to see is something that would say, if you were a family and you needed an in-law apartment because you had a family member that needed to live, that you wanted to live with you, then you should be able to do that, but you should have to go and get a permit to do that and be able to show proof that that person is related. And then to renew that every year, so that when that situation ceases to exist, then you lose the in-law apartment and it goes away forever.
Right, and that's what we had proposed. I can certainly research the proposal out to the zoning subcommittee and the other members of the council, if that's something that the folks would like to revisit.
Okay, and one of the things that we've heard a lot about are people that are just buying homes, single-family homes, whatever, and just renting them out, renting out every room in the house, so that they're, without being licensed as a lodging house or a boarding house, they're operating that way. But at the same time, we do have, because we have the university here, we have a lot of properties that are rented out to students. Students are never related. So how do you treat that? I mean, to me, what would make sense would be that if you had a house and you were going to rent out to students, that it should be one student per bedroom, not two students per bedroom. So if you have a 3-bedroom house, you can rent it out to 3 students and just kind of go like that. I think that, I mean, we have a whole cottage industry in this city of people that rent out to students. So, I mean, you can't just like turn that off all of a sudden. But what do you think about that?
Well, I think you're touching on a really, I think this is a subject that I think has brought the neighborhoods in, which is concern that where 10 years ago, anybody who'd been in the city in that time could point out where the student housing was. The expansion of the university and the increased student body at the university has kind of pushed some of this student housing out into places where it wasn't traditionally happening, and into places that were traditional single-family neighborhoods of families. From the city's perspective, under the current ordinances, if you had a 3-bedroom single-family house and you had 3 students living there, you would be fine. You're not in violation of any ordinance. You're operating as a single family because it's 3 unrelated people. It's when you have a 4-bedroom house and you're renting out to 4 students that you run afoul of our definition of family. The problem has been enforcement. And so the idea about this ordinance would be that the landlord's going to be the one who's responsible for determining whether or not they're related. And if they're renting out to students, they can't rent out to 4. They can rent out to 3. The question, I think, for the council is, what does that mean for a 4-family house?
Well, this is what I think. I think, you know, if you have a 4-family house and you have a family...
A 4-bedroom house, I apologize.
I'm sorry, 4-bedroom house, and you have a family living there that buys the house, they live there, or they rent there, and they're all related, and you got 6 or 7 kids, so you're putting 2 kids or maybe even 3 kids in a bedroom. That's okay as far as I'm concerned, because you're gonna have a limited probably number of vehicles and so forth and so on, and it's a family unit, right, no matter how large it is. If they're not related, and if they're students, then I would think that it would make sense to limit it to 1 student per bedroom, so that you don't have a lot of people living in each bedroom, and you don't have overcrowding like that. And I think that would, to me, that makes sense to do it that way. And it should be satisfactory both to everybody, to the neighborhoods, but also to those landlords that are renting out to students right now.
That's
Do you
certainly
have a comment on that?
So as I mentioned in the beginning, we made a determination in conversations with the law department to not mention students in the ordinance, in part because of concerns about whether or not we were we're targeting students in a way that might not be legal. So while I think that that suggestion I think it makes sense and certainly is worth having a conversation about how we could affect it. The question would be, how could we affect that in a way that would pass, constitutional muster as not targeting a particular
Right,
group
but
of students?
for our conversation here today, we all know that we're all talking about students, so.
That's true.
So let's do that. When we write the ordinance, I suppose we can call them something else, but, but I think that's the majority, isn't it? Would be students.
Yeah, I mean, the question would be whether or not that is satisfactory to all of the interested all the stakeholders in this would find that to be an amicable solution. I certainly think that it's a very good one from my perspective, and I think it merits having a conversation to see if we can figure out a way to affect it.
Okay, so just to swing back to the 3 to 5 year thing, I suppose that depends on, somebody at the city is going to have to say what we have the capacity to do in terms of inspections. And to me, there's no sense in having it be that we're going to put on the books that we're going to inspect every unit every 3 years, and then we never do it. And we've gone through, what, 2 cycles just about on that now?
We're in the midst of the second cycle. Yeah.
So that's all I've got.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you. Councilor Mercier? And then
thank you.
we're going to try to open it up to the public for a little bit. What we
No,
probably will end up doing.
I'll make this
Right,
quick.
we're
I'll
gonna
make this
Okay,
quick.
thank you,
I'm
Councilor
only
Mercier.
reiterating what Councilor Kennedy said, and I only can relate to what happened to me over this past week. In anticipation of this subcommittee meeting, I had numerous calls from people that live in the city, in many parts of the city, that own property in the area of UMass Lowell. And they said that they have bedrooms that they've been renting to students for many years. And they were afraid that with this ordinance, they were going to be shut down, and they earn their livelihood that way. And there is a need, and I understand where residents get nervous with parties and all this stuff, and I can anticipate and sympathize with that. So it's a fine line that we walk on, but I do understand where Councilor Kennedy is coming from, where for years these people have rented out to students. One caller told me he has a 3-bedroom home and he has 3 students there. Another one said he had 4 bedrooms and he rents out to 4 students. So 1 bedroom per student. I don't know what happens on the weekend. I can sympathize with the public. They're probably going to come up and say they're against it, but this has been going on for a while, and so I don't, I'm trying to be fair, but it is a fine line there, but I don't want to jeopardize people who have been doing this for years, and so let me ask you, do they have to declare, I didn't ask the people that called me, but do they have to declare with the city and say that it's a building that is renting to students, or they have to acknowledge what they do with their property? Is this part of the ordinance as well?
So it wouldn't be about students, but it would be whether or not they're renting to more than 3 unrelated people.
Oh, I see.
That would be the
I
trigger.
see.
And I, just very briefly, I know that the subcommittee wants to get to the public. As part of this, we've had ongoing conversations with the university, and they urged me to make it clear that they have a very good relationship with the Lowell Police Department, and they have protocols for what happens if there's a complaint for a party, excessive noise, that if the Lowell police get called for that and they make a determination that there are students at the location that they're called to, they immediately contact the UMass Lowell police. The UMass Lowell police go out to the property, and the students are subject to the UMass Lowell Code of Conduct and can be disciplined by the university if they're found in violation of that code of conduct as a result of issues that happen in a private residence if they're students. So they wanted me to kind of reiterate that if there's noise complaints, if there are issues that people are having with these properties, that they should absolutely call the Lowell police, and the Lowell police have a protocol for how to interact with the university and make the university aware of that property and hopefully deal with it.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Councilor Mercia. At this point, I just want to remind the audience that we are up against the 6:30 deadline, so what we'll probably end up doing, if it's okay with my colleagues, we'll probably end up recessing the subcommittee meeting and scheduling another subcommittee meeting. There could be an action taken relative to the 3 to 5 year inspection if the board wanted to go in that direction this evening. But I think we're hearing a lot of information. We obviously have a lot of people from the public that want to be heard. So at this point, it's about 6:10. If it's okay with my colleagues, I'll open it up to the public to come to the microphone and speak on the issue before us, which again is the amendments to the rental property ordinance. Anybody want to come forward? Please sign your name and thank you so much.
Well, gentlemen, madam, this is who we are, and this is why we're here. My name is Mina Jeetsi, and I am part of a group made up of property owners, managers, tenants, and business people in Lowell. We are here in opposition to the amendments now and the laws that restrict more than 3 unrelated people from cohabitating in a dwelling. So we had a short time to learn about this in the past meeting, but we started with trying to understand the concerns of the council and the citizens. So I began by referring to the minutes and the video from May 22nd. Had we been informed, we would have been there, we would have attended. It was apparent in this meeting that we were not seen as people, but this group perceived as a machine consuming neighborhoods and homes. Well, look at us, look at us. We are all different. Our group is made up of different genders, ages, ethnicities, and financial means. But we are all the same too, because we are proud of the part that we have had in the growth of the city of Lowell. We include a 4th-generation citizen of the city, as well as individuals with fresh perspectives. We are taxpayers. We are contributors to schools, sponsors of teams and parks. We have been part of the revitalization of Lowell. We've bought houses when people told us not to. We were crazy. We had to convince prospective banks that Lowell had a thriving future. We're all about Lowell. And we bought houses in areas that there were drugs and crimes, and we developed them into beautiful dwellings that have increased property value and helped stabilize neighborhoods. These groups, we're proud of these groups. Our group includes proud parents of UMass Lowell students. We house out-of-state and international students from UMass Lowell that have made the city and the university so competitive, desirable, and nationally recognized in a positive way. We help CTI, we help Lowell Housing, we employ plumbers, siders, electricians, and many more people in the trades. Our tenants support local coffee shops, restaurants, and businesses, thriving businesses in Lowell. Our tenants include progressive families, including immigrants, students, conventional and unconventional couples and families, and lifelong friends. We respect their definition of family and their right to privacy. We are proud of that part. We are. We're proud of the part that we've played in Lowell. And for this, we don't want to be punished. We fear that this bylaw will result in selective enforcement, as described in the City of Worcester versus College Hill property case. The target of this bylaw would be that students in unconventional families would be targeted. This is in direct conflict with the Massachusetts Fair Housing Law, which states, of course, that discrimination cannot occur on any basis, particularly family or marital status. So, referring back to the May 22nd meeting, it was said, is there an economic disadvantage that we can give to prevent these properties from being flipped? I assume that means flipped or developed. We don't flip them, we're developing them. This would be selective enforcement to current and potential property owners This may have negative ramifications, including making properties less desirable for prospective buyers, families, and leading in a decline in property values. Growing up in Cambridge, I saw the negative effects of rent control, of policing property owners. I remember it. These hardworking people labored to afford these houses, and they were policed. Property owners were targeted, definitely. People left, neighborhoods declined, and our neighborhoods in East Cambridge dissolved. Our group here is to work together. We just want to work together. This is our objective. And we begin, it is said that there have been many complaints. I heard that in the minutes that I listened to. And what are they? Why aren't we notified? Can we get a system where we're notified? As an example, this is just an example. So there was a mattress dropped off in one of our houses in front. It just was dropped off. So the Board of Health contacted us and said, hey, you know, the mattress, get it out. We had already done it, but this is an example. Communication, action. I hope that's what we can get. That's what we're striving for. Students can be a targeted group. Times have changed. You are right. It's my understanding that there are 18,000 students at UMass Lowell and only 5,000 beds. Well, that leaves 13,000 commuters and residential students that would otherwise not be able to attend university. The numbers are there. Now, they're not going to go away. They're not going to go down. And without the students, you cannot have university. Without the university, the city will decline. It's a real number. The enrollment is growing. We help house these students in legal dwellings, both existing and remodeled. We are subject to periodic inspections in compliance to Massachusetts state and local building ordinance, as we have heard. It is the goal of this council, I'm sure, and the citizens group to find solutions. We must, if that's the goal, we must be informed of these meetings. We want to work together. So we've had a short time. We have had brainstormed a couple of things. So we form a property owner group with contact information, and we're informed of all these documented complaints, the problem, the location, the time. It's logical, right? I get my email, this is my problem, we act on it. Another idea, one of our members proposed a property owner task groups that would visit property. So it would be a task group of the property owners. And we would visit the properties in the evenings. It was even suggested that we hire UMass Lowell police. So that would lessen the financial burden of the citizens in Lowell. Mr. Kennedy just suggested the idea of strictly enforcing one bedroom with one student. That makes sense. That's doable. We would want to work together. Seeing as we're all members of this community in one capacity or another, we should work together toward achievement of our common goal, which we believe is to create and maintain strong, robust, comfortable, and safe neighborhoods, because surely we will all benefit. So we're not here, all of us, we are not here with raised arms. We're here to link arms. Can we do that? Can we get you to all? We all want to do this. One person, one bedroom. We're about the new ways of thinking. We want this to happen. We don't want to target students. There is a petition here that we've all signed, many. And can I submit this? Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for listening to me and listening to us.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else like to come before the, oh. Good evening, Mr. Flynn.
Thanks.
I know it's hard to believe he was my teacher in middle school, high school. High school. I know, huh?
My name
He
is
looks
Tom
good.
Flynn,
Yes.
39 Waterford Street. And I was at a subcommittee meeting a few months ago and raised concerns about a couple of properties on Ellis Avenue. I have no idea what is going on at 5561, but a foundation went in, then work stopped. Work did not begin again until March. Recently, I found 3 transactions on the Registry of Deeds site on March 5th, 2018, all transferred between different trusts. And I feel there's something fishy going on there with whatever's being developed. Last night, I was at the zoning board meeting. They met on 41 Ellis. 41 Ellis was boarded up for a number of years. It was a single family that was auctioned for $90,000 on November 13th, 2017. It is a 2,465 square foot lot with 40-foot frontage. The dilapidated building was removed. Fieldstone foundation was repointed, bulkhead stairs were put in, then building began. Part of the building extends beyond the foundation. There are 3 floors with 2 dormers on the 3rd floor. Work suddenly had stopped. It seems there had been no permit issued to build. A single family has become a 3-floor, 2-apartment building with 7 bedrooms. The person who owns this property owns one across the street, which is rented to college students. When this moves to your neighborhood, it's not a laughing matter. When the parties happen, the beer cans are everywhere, and various other activities go on in the street as they're breaking up. A lawyer said that last night was not the place to discuss who his client would rent to. When do we find that out? Nobody, you talk about getting notification. Nobody notified us what was happening with this property. What really surprised me is that a former building inspector spoke on behalf of the owner in the sense of character representation. Well, the issue was not with the character. The issue was with the building. And to speak on behalf of a building that there was no permit for strikes me as kind of a little conflict there. But I will leave you with this, that this is another stealth dorm coming to a neighborhood that already has a couple.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
You're welcome. And thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dylan Archambault. I'm born and raised in the city of Lowell. I'm a business owner, property owner. I'm a part of the group here tonight. I'm old enough to know and to remember once upon a time in the 80s when Lowell was featured on HBO in a documentary that many of us want to forget. Over the years, this beautiful city that we all love has become a college town, let's face it. The 2 universities that we have, Middlesex Community College and the University of Lowell, have been the catalyst for this city, for the revitalization. People want to now invest in Lowell, when a short time ago that was not always the case. The city was overrun with drugs, boarded up houses, you name it. Now, if you look around, you have a group of investors, of people that have spent their time, their money, their blood, their sweat into beautifying this city. The University of Lowell continues to grow. We have students from over 50 different countries that come here. It is an affordable college. Students from New England, all over America, We have programs, top programs in the country, nursing, engineering, nanotechnology. The school continues to grow. And we're here hand in hand with the school offering housing. I know dozens of business owners that benefit from the students that we rent to. Pizza places, variety stores, cellular phone companies. All of these people are investing in the city. Downtown, many of our students go downtown. There's talk about revitalizing downtown for years. I think the students are a big part of that. And I think it would be a shame to go after and limit who can live in these places. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Archambault. What I would like to suggest is that this speaker be the last speaker for this evening, and then we will get back in touch with you all to schedule another zoning subcommittee meeting, if that makes sense, because we are up against a 6:30 deadline.
Thank you, sir.
Good
My name's
evening.
Daniel Mahoney. I'm a client at Carl's Place. It's a sober house in the city here. From my understanding, this zoning change would affect sober houses. It would affect me. I'd end up back in jail. That's the best that could happen to people in these places in recovery. Most of these people are going to end up back on the street, and you're probably going to have to build a couple more shelters, hire some more police. So maybe like within the next business meeting you guys have or whatever, you can try to think about the ultimate ramifications that this is going to have on the city. Not only are you taking away students' housing, but people in recovery trying to do the right thing who are sober right now are all of a sudden going to be put on the street. I do a lot of work myself for my recovery and in my sobriety. I'd be all right. I know a lot of individuals that would not be. So I'd just like to bring it to the board to try to maybe really think about what's really going to happen here. You'll have a whole other issue on your hands. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, with that being said, what I'd like to do is, I'm sorry, Councilor Elliott.
I just wanted to suggest maybe through the subcommittee, there were a couple of recommendations made by the first speaker with the task force and communicating. I think in between now and the next time there is another subcommittee meeting that we recommend the city manager meet with the organization to perhaps implement some of those recommendations, because I think in large part communication is a big part of it. And if they have a task force that they've set up to be sort of eyes and ears and boots on the street, I think that makes some sense. So.
Okay. Thank you for that suggestion. Mr. Slagle?
And very clearly, I just wanted to know if the subcommittee wanted the administration to attempt to draft some language in reaction to Councilor Kennedy's proposal.
Okay, Councilor Kennedy?
Yeah, I think it would be good to do that, to at least take it up, but I also think that you have to make an assessment of exactly how long it would take to do a cycle, whether that would be 3 or 5 years.
Absolutely.
Let me just ask one other thing, and this is, I've just thought about this, I haven't thought about this enough, but what occurred to me is that we're kind of lumping together group homes with student housing with boarding houses. And that maybe it would make some sense to build into the ordinance that that properties that are going to be used for student housing, that they register with the university. So and this would require cooperation with the university, but so that they would be little mini dorms, right? And if we were to do that, then what does that do as far as fair housing? And this is just a question for next time, but is that something that we could do in order to address student housing, off-campus student housing? And treat that a little differently than the way we treat group homes or boarding houses, which I think both require licenses, right? Don't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have had conversations along this line with the university, and I will certainly reach back out to them and try to get some more information back to the council.
Okay, so maybe we can take that up next time.
Yes.
Thank you.
At this point, the chair would entertain a motion to accept the report as a report of progress.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Move to
Thank you.
adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Second? Thank you.
Second.
We stand adjourned. Again, thank you all for coming, and we will notify you early on for the next meeting. Thank you.